to be talking about the voice in a brand, which is a very strange notion that a brand is going to wake up and actually speak to people. And we didn't have to worry about that too much, 20 years ago. You know, people put things on billboards or in ads, and yes, we had to watch out for brand characteristics, but not to the extent we do today, where brands are coming out and speaking with people through social media. So it's a new phenomenon that we're dealing with. So we pulled together several people. First is Shiv Singh from Pepsi. And the first time I met Shiv, I saw him speaking, and the first thing he said, I remember the words today, is, "You don't own your brand anymore, your customer owns your brand." And a lot of people are saying that today, but when Shiv said it a couple of years back, I was rather bowled over by the notion. Kitty Sheehan from Frontier Natural and Robert Nachman from Steuben. Thanks, guys. So, Kitty, you and I have spoken quite a bit about what you've done with Frontier Natural, and you have a particularly interesting story that I love about how you developed your voice. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. We started out trying to figure out who we wanted to be on social media. Frontier is a pioneering spice company based in Iowa, pioneering as far as the organics industry goes. They've been around since the 80s. And we have a big commitment to sustainability and treating the environment with respect, but also having fun. So we wanted our voice to reflect that, and we were talking in meetings, and somehow it came up. We started talking about an essay that Dick Cavett had just written in the New York Times, and our marketing manager said, I want to sound like Dick Cavett. So we were charged with doing that, and it's really been fun to just kind of always keep that level of respect there, but have fun and then engage people.
But you guys very specifically were sitting around a table one day going, this is who we want to sound like.
Exactly. We had several meetings about what our voice was going to be.
Now, Robert, you had a similar sort of conundrum. You were taking a very old, over 100-year brand that was associated with dusty china cabinets and bringing it into the 21st century. How did you help create a new voice there?
Well, we're not only creating a new voice, but a complete new brand identity. So the voice is a part of that goes into how are we, first of all, who is our target audience, and then how are we going to portray our brand to that audience in a way that engages them and appeals to them. So part of that was the voice indeed, and we wanted it to be very insiderly, very knowing, very sophisticated, very urban, very urbane. So from that, you start to create a persona. That's what we did both literally and figuratively, created who is this person that would personify Steuben, and what would they sound like? How would they talk if you met them at a cocktail party? And from there, the voice evolves.
So we got Dick Cavett and somebody. Would you like to have that person over for dinner?
Well, absolutely. If you don't want to have that person over for dinner, you're not going to buy the product they represent. So, absolutely.
Now, Shiv, you represent like 6, 7, 8, 9 different brands over at Pepsi, which I imagine is this giant monolithic building that people are inside there doing strange things and guarding their secrets. How do you develop voices at Pepsi?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the approach we take is, so in a similar fashion, we have a challenge where, you know, the brands a lot of our brands have been around for a very long time, and practically everyone in the country has an opinion on the brands. And it can be tied to an advertising campaign, it can be tied to a celebrity who's attached to the brand. Like, you know, when I think of Pepsi, I still think of Michael Jackson for some reason. So in this broader context, to think about a social voice for the brand becomes very challenging. And what we've found is, more important than anything else, is that the social voice has to be the voice of a real person. So, you know, I could introduce you to Jenny, who's the voice for the Mountain Dew brand, the social voice for the Mountain Dew brand, or Sam for Pepsi Max, or George for Pepsi. They're real people speaking on behalf of the brand. They actually all have their own personal Twitter handles. They're not the brand itself. There's a difference there. And this is something I even talked about in my book, where I have these two columns. One is, what's your brand image and your brand voice? And then who and what are your social voices, and they work in harmony together. But when it comes to social voices, they need to be real people behind them. So what that does is it gives us flexibility as well, and those guys feel less pressure. They're not carrying the weight of all of Pepsi on their shoulders
Right.
too. They're still themselves.
I'm never going to look at Mountain Dew the same. It's Jenny now, right?
For us, it's
Format
interesting what
video.
you said, that they're real people. For us, we created people. We didn't have a real person that was representative of what we wanted this symbol of the company to be. So we created them, and then we had somebody ghostwrite it in the voice of that person. We did create a persona for her. She's married, had kids, where she lived, what she did, and so that her tweets and her blog entries and all that followed the life of a real person, but it wasn't a real person. It was ghosted.
Now, social media is all about authenticity and transparency. Was that a challenge with that?
No, because there are, I mean, you try to do it in an authentic way, in an authentic voice, but I mean, a lot of blogs are ghostwritten, let's be honest. I mean, there are a lot that are a business or a love of an individual, but a lot of things are ghostwritten at the corporate level. You just can't, keep up. I mean, if you had just one person answering all the hundreds of thousands of tweets and postings that you got per brand, I mean, that 48 hours a day wouldn't allow you to do that.
Right.
So there has to be some leeway.
So in a way, even people at Pepsi, because they're not speaking in their voice, they're still having to assume another voice to a certain extent?
Well, so what it is, and I wouldn't say we've got it done perfect, but what we try to do, so on brands that don't have as much engagement online, it's manageable with one person. But on the larger brands, that can become a challenge, and what we do as much as possible is whoever's serving and talking on behalf of the brand through the account, they have their initials at the end of the tweet,
Okay.
which helps.
You
And
can
then-
personalize it some.
Yeah, and then in the bio, so like if you were to go to twitter.com/Pepsi and you'd read the profile description, you'd say tweets from these 4 people.
Right.
So at least there's transparency. So we're speaking on behalf of the brand,
Right.
but it's not just one person.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And Kitty, you are an individual speaking for several brands, so it's probably a little bit more manageable.
It is. There are 3 brands. One of them is aromatherapy, and 2 of them are spice brands. We have other products within those too, but it's still under the umbrella of Frontier.
Right.
So it's still that voice where we still have the same values. The sustainability is our focus, and it does become more manageable, but we try to answer every question that's on Facebook. Some people touched on earlier to leave the negatives out there and answer them, and we've had a lot of success doing that, solving a problem right on our page, and then having one of our fans say, "Thank you so much, I've never been treated this well," and things like that. So the fans speak for us. On that issue of voice, we were talking in the green room. We had our great panel in the green room. I have found it to be a challenge sometimes, other people who have wanted to hire me to be their voice, where, as I mentioned, some people have such a unique voice that you can't do it for them. So you really need to work with them on that, and sometimes you just have to teach people how to do it themselves.
Right.
So-
Do any of you ever have to go, wait a minute, what happened yesterday, what was written yesterday was off voice? I mean, that's, just didn't hit it.
I have not had that
Well,
experience.
because you're the writer, so.
Right.
Absolutely, I have. I mean, in the beginning, and just like anything else, you review what was wrong about it and you refine it.
Right, and probably out of that conversation, it can even get better and better.
Oh, absolutely. And that's true of, there's an immediacy, obviously, in social that you can avoid in something that's printed, where you do have the leeway to edit it and refine it, but that's true of any time you're dealing with copy or visual or anything. You need to, obviously, refine it, improve it,
Right.
get better.
Right.
Yeah, no, so we absolutely, look at how we're tweeting, how we're posting on Facebook, seeing if that's in sync with what the brand represents and what the brand is, and still authentic to the person who's speaking on behalf of the brand. And then the other thing that we do is we pay attention to what kind of feedback we get from our consumers or fellow participants out in the social web. And that also heavily drives and influences how we then tweet in the future. Yeah.
I would imagine your voice, your persona, and your brand is also going to align very closely with your target demographics. I mean, you're not going to speak like a teenager if your target demographic is middle-aged people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the goal. The interesting thing always, though, is that, you know, who choose to follow us is we don't choose them; they choose us.
Sure.
And there've been some funny instances where, you know, the brand may have a certain target audience and it may have a certain buyer, but then when we look at all the metrics on Twitter or on Facebook, there can be a bit of a disconnect, and that takes a lot of unpacking and understanding why that's the case as well. Yeah.
Facebook has started this new insights thing where it pulls a little fact that just jumps out at you. I was on one of our brand pages the other day, and it said, 648 of your fans also like Sarah Palin. That's good to know. Thank you. Thank you, Facebook. Good.
Yeah,
Not sure what to do with that right now, but so you just never know.
Yeah.
You really don't. You learn something new every single day.
Absolutely. But, you know, you raised something that's really interesting, which is that we're now able to understand a lot more and learn a lot more about our followers or our fans and the affinities. So, like, for example, you know, when we see a high overlap between, you know, Pepsi Max and, you know, several NFL sports teams, that's really good for us to know, because that helps us when we talk to them about doing joint programs together. We say, look, we have a common fan base. Let's collaborate together. So it creates a lot of interesting opportunities. Yeah.
Yes, there's so much there for the taking. There really is.
Yeah, totally.
Now, do you do persona work where you sort of put up on the board your ideal customer, or even who you are, perhaps, make pictures around them and talk about what magazines they read or something?
So for consumers, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, we do an immense amount to understand, you know, our target consumers, what their lives are like, everything that they do, and understand. We don't create personas for the brand itself on Twitter or on Facebook, but we create guidelines. And then, you know, it's really at a point with a lot of our brands where it has to feel right. And if we know our brands well, we can look at a tweet and say, yes, that's from the brand. Or if it isn't, you know, we can tell that. Sure. Yeah. It doesn't always have to be so formulaic. Yeah.
We did the same thing when we had to, because if you looked at who our actual customer was 2.5 years ago when I arrived at Steuben, their median age was 64 years old. Just that alone is a problem for any business. As your audience ages, obviously they start to dwindle. So not only was it an age, so we wanted to lower it to... Well, I mean, so we want to lower our age to 38 is the median age, and come around with all this. So you do create a persona that this brand will appeal to. Obviously, from that, you grow it, you make it broader, but I think you have to have a concrete idea of who ideally you want to appeal to.
That's a really good point. I've had some meetings with some brands that did not know that yet. And so it's impossible to know how to help them because they haven't figured that out.
And you know, in some cases, like with us, you know, many of our brands are big mass brands, and we can't be everything to everyone. So we say, given the demographics and the psychographics of Twitter, for example, we will focus on this audience.
Sure.
And connect with them in that way. And that also helps make it more manageable as well. Yeah.
I think our time is cranking down. Do we have room for one question?
I want to hear that music, so let's keep going.
You want to hear the Exodus theme from Exodus? Don't accelerate it. No questions? Then we'll probably have it as we leave the stage. So thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.